Welcome to our Manhattan Facebook Town Hall series. I'm John Mata, chairman of our Manhattan, a local political action committee. We've been around since 2010, and we focus on local races, school board, city commission, county commission, and state races. For the most part, this season, we've been doing city commission, but tonight we have something a little different. We haven't concentrated much on school board, but we are tonight. We have school board candidate Tom Drummond, who's joining us, and with us as our producer is Ed McNamara, our Manhattan producer. And we're going to get started here. First thing, Tom, can you introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for USD 383 school board?
Sure. So, for the audience, in an attempt to be thorough, I do have my little pre-prepared introduction speech, and I just want to be open about that. So I'm going to read it because I will forget things. So, as was already said, my name's Tom Drummond. So I'm a retired veteran with 29 years of service. I studied nuclear physics at Youngstown State University, where I eventually earned my 7 through 12 integrated science license. After which, I taught at an inner city school where I saw firsthand the challenges and promises of our education system. After serving as a Navy corpsman, a Navy salvage diver, and being attached to the Marine Corps' 3rd Marine Division, and getting published in the nuclear physics literature, I spent approximately the last 15 years of my career practicing medicine as a physician assistant for the Army. I made Manhattan my home about 10 years ago. My wife met here, we got married here, and we're now raising our children here. Becoming a father, despite very late in life, that forced me to realize that having an excellent education system is not just about my kids, but about all of our children. So that is why I'm running for school board to restore the focus, rigor, and transparency to our schools to produce disciplined, capable adult minds, not just earning diplomas. Our district reading and mathematical proficiencies are just unacceptable. That is not the fault of our teachers. It's the result of a system that continues lowering standards and to protect institutions instead of improving outcomes for our children. Parents deserve clear, honest, transparent reporting on how their children are performing, not the practice of redefining success. So if I'm elected, I'm going to fight to return to direct, structured instruction in reading, writing, mathematics. I will ask for policies that keep classrooms orderly, the teachers respected, students safe, and screen time minimized. And I will try to insist that the district makes the data transparent so that parents can see the unfiltered, unspun, unhidden information about their performance, even when it's uncomfortable. Because I'm going to ask the state or try to require the state to take all that information that they have sequestered away and make it available to the public in an understandable way that the common everyday parent can access. So that's who I am.
Okay, thanks, Tom. You went through a few issues there, but my next question is, what do you think is, if you had to pick one, what's the biggest issue facing USD 383?
So everybody always, I think, defaults to the budget, the mills, the finances. So I will address that. But for me personally, it's the indoctrination. It's the loss of focus. It's the loss of fundamentals. It's the loss of rigorousness. It's while psychological and emotional well-being is important, you cannot ignore that for students, especially younger students. Replacing that or making the emotional space more of a priority than rigorous academics, quantitative analysis, performance metrics. To me, that just says that the system is losing focus and moving more towards, I don't know, virtue signaling, empathy stuff. While important, it's not the primary focus. So I think that it's just measurements, rigorousness, quantitative assessments, better assessment tools, and not just the internal ones to the state and the school district, but like external measurements as well to, hey, after they graduate, what are the metrics we're using to assess how successful of an adult are they?
So, okay. Yeah, well, I was at one meeting where you spoke and you actually mentioned that about trying to come up with some metrics to see how successful the kids were later on in life from the school. I think that's a great idea. Obviously, it's going to take a long time to get something like that set up for the future.
Yeah, because the state is not going to
The-
want to relinquish the control and the power. They're going to want to sequester it, because the CSV, the comma separated value data chart that the state has, yeah, the information's there, but you have to have a compute. Well, I mean, I'm being sarcastic, but you nearly have to have a computer engineering degree to go in there and then download that whole thing and then sift through it and organize it in order to extract the bits of information for performance metrics for your district. And yeah, so it's going to take a while.
So, okay. We have one other question later on that talks a little bit about that. So I think we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Kind of jumping a little bit here, something a little more mundane. The city is looking at building an indoor aquatic center. Many believe
Mm.
USD 383 should participate in this endeavor financially. They cite the school's swimming diving team as a major reason for this. Where do you stand on that?
So, as I understand it, there's three levels of this pool. They have the I think ranging, I think, from roughly like 125 or 130 million down to about a $25 million option. So the 125 million, that's going to be huge. It's going to have an indoor, it's all indoor stuff. It's going to have indoor, like a lazy raft ride, and it sounds amazing. And then there's the mid tier, and then the bottom tier is the one that's going to be essentially competition water, where the rest of it is going to incorporate a lot of leisure water. All right, so where do I stand on it? Well, if it's for competition water for the athletes, well, then Genesis has a pool for training. Also, K State. There would be options to do coordination and collaboration between maybe Genesis and K State in order to utilize their water for training purposes. Now, as far as doing the competitions, then I would say, all right, if we're going to go with competition water only, let's do an ROI. What's our return on investment? If we spend even the 25 million on the competition water only, is that going to generate more publicity, better media, more exposure? Will there be maybe even some additional income into the district because we hold competitions here? If we go with the top option, which is going to have a lot of leisure water, well, again, there, I would say start with the metrics of, hey, okay, what's our ROI? Are we going to have better mental health in the winter? Because it's a very real thing. The cloudier it is, I mean, having practiced medicine, it's real. That's SAD, seasonal affective disorder. That's real. It does affect people. It makes them depressed. So I'm just thinking about this now, like, okay, could we measure that? Hey, if we build this thing, will the mental health of our community improve? Will we have less kids, causing problems because they're with their parents or they're with their buddies in the aquatic center? But I haven't heard anybody ask that. They're just talking about who's going to pay for it, how much is it going to cost, which you have to address that. But what are the other metrics? So before saying, hey, build it or not build it, I'm going to ask, why are we building it? And what's the ROI?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's mostly a initiative for the city and folks that wanted for like the Marlins as well as everyone just or a lot of people want an indoor aquatic center to be able to do it in the winter. But they're trying to get K State, who of course closed the natatorium, so they no longer have a pool. Uh, but it's a big financial lift for that.
Hmm.
So, well, we do. Looks like we might have a question here.
Yeah, you want to do with that?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
All right. So do you want me to read it, or what do you guys read? Oh, you guys posted. Okay.
No,
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay.
So, Catherine Shalagic asks, she says, you have posted, and I quote, and this is you supposedly said this, I hold the view that a mother's need to work does not justify exposing her children to communist indoctrination in her absence. And then she asks, first, how do you define communism? And second, what leads you to believe that children in USD 383 are being indoctrinated into communism?
So communism can roughly be described as the state, the government, the elites. They control everything. They control all the means of production, storage of those means and services, distribution of them, how much is distributed, so that everybody has equity, which is equal outcomes. So now there's more subtlety to it. There's a lot of complexity to communism, but the essence is the government controls everything. So if that doesn't answer your first part of the question, please make another comment and we'll dig into it further. But to address the second part, DEI, which has been pushed and pushed and pushed. The E, Catherine, is equity. There is a difference between equity and equality. When people speak of equity, it is advertised. Equity is equal outcomes. Equality is equality of opportunity. So when people talk about DEI in the classroom and in the school system, that's openly admitting that they're advocating for communism, because they're saying they want equal outcomes, not equal opportunity. So I hope that answers the question.
There's a couple others out here.
This is back to, I think she said, Anna Baldwin, I think she's referring to Genesis. She says that it should be available for paying customers. So if you're a paying customer, I guess, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but you wouldn't want the pool being taken over by, the swim team or anything. And I agree. I use the Genesis pool, and it's I guess what they do is they usually block it off at certain times for swimming lessons and for seniors. And this would just be another time when it wasn't available to paying customers. So I don't know if that's her point or not, but that's my point.
Yeah.
She also
and we had
says
another.
that K-State does not have a pool anymore.
Yeah, they don't.
Well, let me, if I may, to just clarify the Genesis. Yeah, no, the school district would have to, in good faith, make a contract and pay for services rendered. They would have to buy a block of time where they're going to train there. I just want to clarify that.
Okay. And Courtney says that they already, and I don't know if she was just putting this in as a comment on the Facebook page or if she wanted us to address it in the stream, but she's just noting that they already have a contract for team practices at the school.
Yeah, no, and I'm familiar with that. They are doing that, and they don't care for Genesis all that much because of it's not the greatest competition pool, but that is where they do a number of their practices today.
Well, then, as I would say any thinker does, as I gain information, because I can't know everything, as I acquire information, then I would change my view on the competition level water, and I would put further emphasis in considering at least a competition aquatic center to allow those students to have the opportunity to train, practice, and compete.
Yeah. Going on to the next question, which you've kind of talked about a little bit, and it's one kind of close to my heart that I find very frustrating, is the states recently lowered the difficulty of the state standardized testing, resulting in inflation of the scoring. I mean, the new scores that just came out shows everyone is just improving like crazy on these test scores, and it's just because they changed how they do the test. And again, what I fear is, say this first round, people kind of know it's all a bunch of inflation that's in there. But as these go from year to year to year, everyone's going to get, I kind of say, fat, dumb, and happy, thinking that everyone's achieving at this level. Or if you were to take it back to the old standard of just last year, we'd have a lot of people that weren't competent at grade level anymore. It's like, I don't think all of a sudden everyone went up 20 points in these tests. It was because they changed how they're doing the scoring. So how do we guard against getting complacent, thinking now we're at grade level when really it's just an inflation of the result?
Well, so I really dug into this because I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I dusted off my old physics hat and math hat, and I was like, all right, wait, what is the probability? What is the likelihood, using actual mathematical tools, that I can't remember the exact number. I think it was going from about 25% to 38% improvement for the reading and writing, and then a similar delta of about 13 to 15% of improvement in the mathematics. So I was like, okay, if nothing else changed, meaning the budget hasn't changed that much, teacher to student ratio hasn't changed that much, basically not a whole lot has changed in 1 year, in the previous year to now. What is the statistical likelihood, the mathematical probability that you're going to have a delta of 13 to 15%, an increase in 13 to 15% in 1 year? Now, it's not zero, but it's essentially zero. So even though the state has kind of made the information really difficult because they don't exactly release exactly how it's tested, what were the new cores that they looked at, what were the new, I mean, okay, why aren't they releasing it? That makes me suspicious right from the get-go. So if you have indirect mathematical statistical confirmation that that level of improvement, because you don't have access to the actual stuff that's going on, it's essentially zero. That means that, first, I'm just starting with this, that essentially indirectly proves that they just lowered the standards. So let's start with that essentially fact. So what do we do with that? Well, as I opened with, if we continue to protect the institutions that by lowering standards to make them look better, that hurts not only our district, that hurts the entire nation. That hurts everybody because it gives you a false sense of performance. And that is dangerous. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology. And that says something like, well, I'm not going to get into it, but basically, if you tell people that they're a lot smarter and a lot better and higher performers than they actually are, not only is that unfair, it can be emotionally harmful when they finally find out through reality and the marketplace of ideas and the real world that what they were told in school was a lie. And so it's emotionally harmful, it's psychologically harmful, it's just success harmful. So lowering standards is the worst idea that we could do. We have to come up with a way to measure things and be open and transparent. That, to, like I said, to allow that big giant CSV file that is sitting in the state, to allow hire somebody, put them on contract of one of these super smart young people that understand computers, and make the data available to the common everyday parent so they actually know what's going on with the performance of their kids.
Yeah, be interesting to try to take the current scores and somehow to rejigger them to say what it would have been under the old standard versus this new one they've come up with. So I'll read the next question, but actually I've already answered in a way. It was kind of in the beginning. Is many complain that schools have shifted emphasis from reading, writing, and arithmetic to social, emotional based subjective measures. So, which, like I said, you've pretty much already gone over that as one of your critical items. Now, USD 383 in Riley County is the biggest taxing entity there is here, bigger than the county, bigger than the city. And a lot of people are complaining about Riley County taxes. And actually, there's some are leaving because the taxes are too high, or people don't live here. Often live in Pottawatomie County and do a lot in Manhattan, but don't live here because the taxes are too high. What can you do to assure taxpayers that you aren't going to pursue policies that are going to break the bank more than it's already broken?
Well, that is a great question. So, some things that I thought about, and again, being outside the system, I'm not saying that what I'm going to propose is realistic or pragmatic, but there are grants, there are collaborations that we could do with K-State, especially with the ag sector and the bio sector. We could maybe try to, like I said, collaborate with K-State to get some grants from the federal government to offset any proposed mill increases. So, because everybody, I should say everybody, we usually talk about how much we're spending, but I rarely hear us talk about how can we decrease spending. So this would be a way to address the former. Hey, how can we increase the revenue, increase the inputs so we don't raise? But then the other thing I don't hear people talking about is how do we decrease spending? So I was at a school board meeting, I don't know, a month or two ago, and something came up about the administrative staff, and I spoke at that meeting, and I think I spoke at that one. Anyway, I know that if you have too much administration, too many non-teaching faculty, too much support personnel and staff, that drives up costs. So I would say let's look at, hey, do we have redundant positions in admin? Do we have duplicated positions or nearly duplicated positions? Is every single support and administrative position necessary to get the end effect of improved outcomes and better prepared young people to become adults? So there are ideas to bring in extra revenue and to decrease spending. I mean, it's something else that I just stumbled across. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to talk with the superintendent, but I don't know. Do we have all absolutely the top tier efficiency, green lights and LEDs and air conditioners and the window panes? So that would be a way to decrease spending. So
I hope we would after building that brand new school.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So for me, it's a combination of let's find some creative ways to increase revenue into the district while at the same time decreasing unnecessary expenses. Because I talked about this with somebody a while ago, and I did verify it. So like, and I can't remember the exact, because this is going to be on the internet and people will fact check me, and you should fact check me, because if I got stuff wrong, I'm a thinker. I will contemplate, and if I get new information, I will reanalyze it, and maybe I'll change my mind, because that's what thinkers are supposed to do. And that's what we're supposed to actually be doing in the school district anyway, is creating thinkers. So anyway, people will fact check me. But now I've lost my train of thought. Decrease. Oh, yes. Okay, so Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, I can't remember the exact, but the top tier elite schools, some of them have like a 55 to 65% administration staff versus faculty. So they have more administrators than they do faculty teaching professors. There's a danger in any institution, in any agency, for that to occur. And there's a famous quote, I think it's by Adams, and I think it goes something like, the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the expanding needs of the bureaucracy. And that tends to happen if people aren't really focused on efficiency and eliminating redundancy.
Yeah, I don't know what the 383 statistics are. I know Kansas as a whole, if you look at the the number of teachers, hasn't gone up that much. The teacher-student ratio stayed about the same, but the number of administrators per has gone up dramatically over the past number of decades. So I think that's obviously one place that could be looked at. Again, I'm not familiar with what 383 stats are for it. With there was one comment in the comments.
Well,
about
yeah, it
how
looks like Catherine has taken you up on your offer to readdress this. She wanted to clarify what she meant by equity, and I'm going to post this in here, and it'll be interesting to see how big this is, if it covers the whole screen. But let's see. Okay, so I'm just going to read this real quick. So Catherine said that equality means everyone has the same resources. In social justice, equity is the principle of providing people with the specific resources and support they need to have fair access to opportunity and achieve equal outcomes. It differs from equality, which gives everyone the same resources, by acknowledging that different groups have different starting points and different levels of support to overcome historical and systemic barriers. Key aspects of equity and social justice focus on needs. Equity recognizes that people have unique circumstances and needs, and it aims to meet those specific needs to achieve fairness. Addressing systemic barriers, it acknowledges that past and present systemic injustices have created unequal opportunities. Equity seeks to rectify these imbalances by providing resources to those who have been historically disadvantaged. Achieving equal outcomes. The goal of equity is not just to provide equal opportunities, equality, but to ensure that everyone has a fair chance to succeed and achieve similar results. And so, but before you answer that, John, I think that it would be great in future podcasts, like once we're done with the candidates and everything, I would love to be able to invite people in if they have a phone and they can do a quick,
Yeah.
to join us. But I think today is your turn, Tom, for your campaign. So we'll and then while we're on it, before I give you a chance to answer, Catherine also, or no, Courtney just wanted to also, and you can take these one at a time. She's challenging the contention you guys were talking about the scores being changed. She says that your theory's not accurate. The scores here, let me just put it up there. The scores aren't being changed. They changed the cut scores, the levels that indicate limited one, limited below grade level 2, basic at grade level 3, proficient, and 4, advanced. Our state cut scores were far above those nationally and across the country. And she's just wondering if you've actually read the State Board of Education. Okay, so there you go.
Actually, well, I know I'm personally very familiar with those. And yes, they changed the cut scores and they're dramatically improved from year to year, which I don't think we have that dramatic improvement in the kids' scoring. And I don't think we're doing that well nationally, especially when you look at the ACT scores that have come out. This is just a way to change the scorecard to pretend that we're actually achieving something. But hence, this is not me, Tom.
Well, I mean, so John, why don't, as the moderator, if you want to frame what I should address, I'll do it that way.
Well, why don't you do that if you want to? The big old long. I mean, it's difficult because it was so long, and it's using some specific definition that they want to. But I know, really up to you. You want to address the equity one?
Yeah, I'll address the equity one. So I understand Catherine's point. And it sounds so nice what she's saying. But who decides, Catherine? What committee? What body? And do you trust them? Should we all trust them? Who gets to decide the metrics? Who gets to decide how much? Who gets to decide how long all that goes on? How far back in history do we go? So what you're saying sounds wonderful and nice. We live in the most prosperous, wonderful, most tolerant nation to ever exist. And yes, I know the famous quote, and it's a good one. Capitalism is the worst form of government that's ever been tried, except all the others. So capitalism has lots and lots of problems. It creates disparity. It creates inequality. It creates bad outcomes. But that is the nature of reality. Nothing in this world in which we live is based on a governing entity that ensures that any inequity is absolutely, as you use, socially justice redistributed. I mean, you could talk about nations, you could talk about cities, you could talk about little towns, you can, we're talking about individuals, but the nature of improvement, the nature of getting better, polishing your skills, comes from the challenge of knowing, hey, I didn't have what that person had. Do I have to work a little bit harder? Or do I say something to the effect of, well, I can't really succeed because I didn't have what this other person had unless I rely on the government to provide me something extra. And then I come back to, who gets to decide and for how long? Because the reparations for slavery thing, that's a big example. If you're going to, let's just use that one. If you're going to say, hey, okay, let's grant some reparations. Let's just say for this conversation, we're going to grant reparations. How far back in time do we go? Who do we hold accountable? Because if you tie it all the way back, it goes back to at least 10,000 years ago where slavery was everywhere. Are we going to go back and demand reparations from every ancestor throughout history all the way back to 10,000 BC? So I have a heart. I have compassion. I know that there are people that grew up in horrible situations. When I taught in that inner city school, gosh, the principal had to pull me aside and say, Tom, look, these government hot dogs and the government big boxes of mac and cheese, this is the best meal that some of these kids are going to get all day. And so those kids that I taught in that inner city school, I understand their disadvantage. But if I tell them in any capacity, oh, well, you really can't succeed unless some outside agency comes in and helps you by giving you extra stuff, that's not helping them. In my opinion, that's hurting. It doesn't mean you don't help them. It doesn't mean you don't encourage them. But to give them the message like CRT does to say, oh, you are not going to be successful. You have almost zero chance of being successful unless some outside agency lifts you up. That's my view on it.
So, okay, getting back to the list here, the should school teachers or school administrators ever keep secrets from parents regarding their children? This outside of things relating to child abuse, which would be, reported to the proper authority. So, in other words, unless it's something that you think is abuse that you should be going to the authorities so they can immediately look into, obviously. Outside of something like that, um, should um, should teachers or administrators be keeping secrets from parents?
Well, the obvious answer is no, because the parents are the primary caretaker, the primary figure, the source figure in those children's lives. Now, somewhere out there in the audience, in the internet, somebody would say, well, there are really bad parents out there. Yes, I understand that. I'm talking about, on the average, general, good, involved, loving, caring parents. Those people should have the primary access to the most information about their children when they're away from them. Now, of course, there are some things like you talked about, the child abuse and some things. If I had to suspect why this has become a big issue, is because the California state legislature, I think with Gavin Newsom, they essentially passed a law that said, okay, if there is any discussion or intent of a child transitioning, becoming a transgender student, they are not to tell the patient that, or the student or the parents that. So I think I think that's where this started. I mean, I'm just guessing, that's my intuition. So because, hey, if a child is gender questioning and not really sure and having some confusion, does the school have a right to keep that from the parents? Absolutely not. So in my estimation, when the parent calls the teacher, the superintendent, the principal, unless it's something legal that is protected under the litigious statutes, then the parent has a right to know, because they are the primary stakeholder. They're the primary caregiver for that child.
Okay. Speaking of that,
Oh gosh, I just want to, because I know that Courtney was in the chat. So Courtney, all I can tell you is, when you run the statistical tools and you use, I can't remember which tool I used. I think it was a summation series. I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, the probability of what you're saying is almost zero. It's not zero, but it's almost zero that changing the cut scores to demonstrate or that's the word I'm looking for, to demonstrate or give an impression of improvement, it's mathematically nearly impossible. Okay, Courtney, maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I didn't dig in deep enough to the actual data, which is so difficult to parse through and sift through. But I don't need that specific, because I can think generally as a physicist, as a mathematician, and just go, okay, here is a behavior in some system, and it happens to be the cut scores in this. I just apply mathematical tools that I could apply anywhere and go, hey, what's the likelihood that this is organic and real? It's almost zero. I'll grant you, I don't know enough. It's still almost zero, Courtney.
so the next one up, and that again is Courtney again. Under your rationale, you would exclude special education students. So uh, who decides? The
I don't
And I
understand the
think that
question.
was in.
You
I
have to
think
flesh
that
that
was
out
in.
better.
That was in reference to you responding to the equity question, which was more talking about all the kids in general and trying to have every single kid get some sort of special thing designed based on their historical
Oh, I can.
situation.
Okay, I can address
I
that right
mean,
now.
I think special ed is there's like an IEP that's done by evaluation and everything else. So I think the setup is there for those kids.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
But we did get into the uh, uh, transgender stuff, so I've got a few questions that kind of relate to that because that has been a big topic, and we've got one school board person who is kind of like a little billboard for that constantly. Um, how many sexes or genders are there?
XX, XY. Now,
So
speaking,
two.
yeah, two. Yeah. I mean, so, but speaking medically, there are some very, very rare conditions. I mean, everybody knows trisomy 21, Down syndrome. That has nothing to do with transgender. But there are things like that at the genetic level that confuse the sexuality expression. They are incredibly rare. So, excluding the incredibly rare, genuine genetic conditions where you have extra bits and pieces that influence gender expression in the material world, there are two sexes. That's it.
Yeah, I think you did XX and XY, which obviously is a common one there. I think another really good way to look at it is what gametes does uh, a person produce. I mean, if they're
Mm.
small mobile gametes sperm, that's what a male produces. If they're large immobile gametes ova, that's what a female produces. And there's no third gamete, so there's no third sex. Also, you brought up the possible intersex conditions and things like that. The one thing I always like to what other people like to throw out is they say, oh, that's like 2%, 2 point some percent of the population. And they say that's a lot of people. Well, technically, yes, it's 2% or more of the population, but that takes in consideration people that are, for example, born with one testicle or one ovary. They're still identified as male or female. They still produce male or female gametes. You still can tell what they are. It's really a fraction of a percentage that there's any ambiguity of what a person is. So just wanted to clarify that. Um, should students be instructed that it's possible to change sexes or genders?
Absolutely not. Instructed? Are you joking me? No. That
Or told that it's possible. Let's put it that way.
what business? Well, okay, if you're taking an AP biology class on molecular genetics and how, you know, at that level, okay, maybe you could talk about it from an academic perspective, but to talk about it in the classroom as a teacher to a student, what business is that of the teacher? That is something that the parent should address. The teacher has no business, in my opinion. Now, well, let me add a caveat. Providing a space where the student feels safe to bring it up and discuss it and say, hey, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Jones, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm struggling with. There should be a space where the student feels safe to communicate and bring it up. But to have the teacher inflect their own personal bias and personal view in teaching an individual student, let alone a classroom of students, that has no business in the public school system.
Uh, Going along that same series, Kansas law states that biology is what counts when it comes to bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because what 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 can happen for sure is if you start saying, hey, look, a transgender woman who is a biological male is now allowed into a female space. He is bigger biologically, he's stronger, he's going to be faster. So now you have an enclosed space that usually doesn't have a second exit, only one way in, one way out. There's no cameras, no recording devices by law. Most predators know that. So if we start saying, oh, I'm going to allow this person who actually is not transgender, because there are actual adults who have struggled and they've went to therapy and they've talked with people and they're over 18 and maybe they're in their early 20s and they still feel they're in the wrong body. Okay, that adult now can make a choice. But if there is a predator that knows that there's a law on the books where they can just say, I am transgender, and now get themselves into secluded, isolated, no witnesses spaces where they can do very bad things to our women and girls, I think it is a terrible idea to even entertain that whatsoever.
So,
Can
okay.
so I just want to go
Yep.
back to Catherine had also mentioned earlier, and I thought this would be a good chance to, because the community we have now, uh, it does include, because of the culture and everything else, a lot of people who consider themselves children, who consider themselves transgender. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but there's a possibility that if we just try to change things overnight, it could make them feel as individuals like they're being targeted, or they're, because of everything that's preceded it. Like, I don't know if we can just turn it all off overnight. And so Catherine wants you to say, so she says Manhattan's a very diverse community, including
Oh,
racially,
that, yep.
culturally, religiously. Let me put it on screen. Religiously, and also people self-identify. What are you going to do as a board member to make sure that every child and family, that they feel included in values? So, just, you know, integrating your views, which I agree with, as far as I don't think the school board should be, getting into these gender politics or anything. But how are you going to make those people who already have bought into that feel welcome?
So is that your question or her question? I can't quite see it.
It's,
Yeah, it's her question.
Right. Okay. So let me paraphrase to see if I got it. So uh, she's saying that our community is diverse, and she lists out some variables.
Let me read it to you again, just in
Okay.
her words.
All right.
Manhattan is a very diverse community, including racially, culturally, religiously, and self identity. What will you, as a board member, do to make sure every child and family feels included and valued?
Included and valued as a school board member, Catherine. What? Uh, that is the parents' job. Our job on the school board is to hire the superintendent and set policy that ensures that the students are getting an excellent education. What in the world does reinforcing self identity have to do with the school board? I mean, maybe I don't understand the school board well enough, but the school board sets policy and hires a superintendent. You're talking about generating a, a sense of emotional safety, an emotional safe space, so that people feel included and feel wonderful. What in the world? What are you talking about? That has nothing to do with what the school board does. We are there to ensure the safety and the proper policies, so that when the students go through the education program, that they come through that pipeline knowing how to critically think for themselves, um, analyze when they're maybe being propagandized, maybe analyze and become aware that, oh gosh, I don't have enough information. Maybe I should get more information before I make a decision, or if they made a decision, realizing when it's a bad decision. That's what we should be setting policy. And uh, I don't. I don't understand how. Well, I guess I don't have to understand. You asked the question, like, that. What would the school boards? How would I, as a school board member, ensure that there's a space that people feel emotionally valued? As a No, that's not the
it's
school board's
actually,
position.
it's it is an interesting question of how do you make everyone feel everything. Um, and I'm just using this as an example, is how there's been the big pronoun debate and all that type of thing. And there was a case in Junction City where this teacher wouldn't use the pronouns and they suspended her, and she actually won the lawsuit and said you can't have compelled speech. So how would you create that value in the school place when you can't force students to use those pronouns? You can't force the teachers to do it, but yet someone may be offended if you do, and some may be offended if you don't. You do run into some situations where it's almost impossible to make everybody happy from the standpoint when there's sometimes just fundamental disagreements on things that are out there. Again, not asking to, it's just, it does
Are you asking
create
me?
no, I'm just actually just stating it creates some interesting dilemmas
Well, I'll say
when
this real
you
quickly.
run into it.
I'll just there will always be someone to be offended by something, because I am so sick of hearing, well, that's offensive, or I'm offended. What's your point? You're not you are not guaranteed the right to never be offended. I don't know where we got into having the resiliency to hear something offensive, analyze it and go, do they have a point, or are they so far off base that I can just ignore them? But to say, oh, I'm offended, and it's you, the other external agency's responsibility to ensure that you do not offend me, this is crazy.
So it's interesting we got into this line of questioning because I got circled here. It's the number 12 question that I have on here, and it may just be beating a dead horse to ask it again. But I said there's been a lot of emphasis in school on such things as microaggression, oppressor oppressed, and DEI. And I know that because I was on the one of the diversity groups at the high school, and this was a lot that was talked. And we wanted to even talk about having forms, so anyone in the classroom could fill out a form if they were offended about something. And continuing with the question, there seems to be a loss of emphasis on resilience and teaching kids how to overcome obstacles. And what I said at the end is, how do we get back to building confidence in students to overcome perceived or even real unfairness?
Okay. Can you condense and restate the question so that I can wrap my mind around it?
Well, I think the first part of the question was kind of agreeing with some of your premise about how we've had too much emphasis on, things like microaggression, oppress and oppress,
Hmm.
social justice. And I'm just expanded to say we're not teaching kids how to get resilience. You can't always just fill out a form that say someone offended you and have an adult come in and take care of things.
Okay.
Lots of times before,
Okay.
what a teacher would do is tell a student, Johnny said something bad to you. Well, we'll go work it out with Johnny. Don't.
Right. Yes. So, okay. So let's start with the big one, the oppressor versus oppressed narrative, which is straight out of Marx, straight out of the Communist Manifesto. He realized that if you can engender in somebody's psychology this sensation, which then becomes their personalized reality, that they're oppressed, and then have them identify another group that says that's the oppressor that's oppressing me. If you can make that their psychological reality that then becomes their totality of reality, now they are justified in taking any means necessary to stop that person from oppressing them, including unaliving them. So, what ends up happening, if we're not careful, is saying, hey, look, I can never be offended. I can never be insulted. You can never insult me, because if you do, now you're oppressing my free right to go through life with never experiencing a negative emotion. And you nasty bad person, you are preventing me from leading my best life. And if this escalates, now you end up with Charlie Kirk situations. So that and it's amazing to me that the oppressor oppressed narrative is playing itself out in this super weapon that's called the intersectionality movement, because basically what Marx realized, you have to have a large enough population. It can't be some small population that feels really, really oppressed and identified a group of oppressors. It has to be large enough that you can get a revolution, a movement, in order to effect national or civilizational change. The super weapon of the modern day version of that is the intersectionality movement, because if you've had the LGBTQIA plus, you have some people that there's a certain number of, and then you have the BIPOC people and the people of color, and then you have
Yeah.
other groups of
Why don't
people.
we, Tom, because we're getting close to our hour here and I want to try to get these last ones in. But you mentioned Charlie Kirk, so it kind of leads into this next question here. The Katie Allen issues has made a lot of news. If elected, would you support removing her from any official roles representing the district?
Absolutely, absolutely. It
So,
It is, yeah,
okay.
and I've talked about this. Basically, I'll try to be. Yeah, you're right, because we're running long on time.
Yeah.
Basically, I was very, very frustrated and maybe even angry with Katie. But then, as more I thought about it, my heart softened, and I have compassion for her. But I can have compassion for her and forgiveness for her, but I still want her removed, because if she thinks that if she has a mind and a psychology that thinks that celebrating, advocating, or the murder and assassination of a father, because I'm a father. I want to be alive for my little 2-year-old. I was nervous at that senior center answering questions because Charlie had just been murdered. And I'm like, I shouldn't be nervous and on edge at a senior center answering questions about school board, but I am. And for a person like Katie to say, yeah, well deserved. That makes me nervous because I heard my little girl squealing with glee in the back. And I'm like, I want to be alive. I want to be there for her. So yeah, I would absolutely. Anybody that would have a mindset where they even feel or think, let alone post on social media, that yeah, it's good that somebody got murdered and assassinated and taken away from their children because of words. That's the oppressor oppressed narrative.
So next question, we're kind of a little different subject, but still on the controversial
John,
side.
actually, Courtney has, and Courtney's is running against you for, everyone should know that you guys are both running for the school board. She does kind of make a point here, but didn't you just say that people have a right? They don't have a right. Anyway, I think what she's trying to say is you do not have a right to not be offended.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, you do
Okay.
not have the right to walk through life and never be offended. Who came up with this crazy idea?
Okay, but how does that work if you are also offended by Jane's or those comments about Charlie Kirk?
You mean Katie? I'm not
Katie, yeah.
offended. I'm not offended. I'm genuinely worried about my physical safety in life. Courtney, that's not being offended. That's a Fifi's emotion. Oh, I feel some way. No, I'm genuinely concerned about being alive for my daughter because there's people like Katie who think it's okay to celebrate and advocate the murder of a father of children similar to mine. That's not being offended.
So, something a little different. Where do you stand on keeping the Indian as the symbol of the school?
Well, that's an interesting one. And wow, that's cooling down the temperature. Oh, and hey, look, Courtney, if you're still listening to this, I'm looking forward to working with you because we obviously disagree. That means us working together, we could probably come up with some really good ideas because we disagree so much. So anyway, if elected, I'm really looking forward to working with you. Okay, back to the Indian. So so there's Cleveland Indians because I'm from Youngstown, Ohio. It's about an hour from Cleveland. So there's Cleveland Indians and the Kansas City Chiefs. If I'm remembering accurately, I don't know the name of it, the National Council for Native American Interests, something like that, they basically said, look, we as the Native Americans in the nation are proud to have our name on these teams and other mascots and things. So I look to the people that are actually representing that subgroup or that subpopulation. Hey, how do they feel? Not me as an outsider of a different ethnicity that's not in that group, because it's not for me to impose what I think is the highest level of morality or what I think would be the best for that group. I'm going to go ask that group.
So, where do you stand regarding student cell phone usage?
Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Because we know from imaging studies and psychological battery testings and all these, we know that that thing affects the brain. It's a dopamine addiction. It affects neuronal pathways. It affects motor cortex. It affects so many things that like measurable things. Then on top of that, you have what Jonathan Haidt talked about. You know, it affects people's like self-esteem because what do people post on social media? Only their best and most amazing pictures and events, and so you get this idea that people are leading this false life, and then usually it tends to be that the younger the mind, the higher the level of comparison to your peer group. So not only do we have empirical measurable things that it's damaging in brains, we also know that it affects psychology and emotional states. It's get rid of them. And look, I'm slightly tongue in cheek, but they're not senators. They're not CEOs. They're not on call surgeons. Why do they need to be connected and reachable 24/7? And the other metaphor or analogy is like when you're training to be an athlete, especially like elite athletes, whenever an elite athlete is training for anything, they're not on their phone. They're dedicated to their discipline and their craft for that block of instruction and training. Why do we treat academia and academics any different than that? So, no, get rid of them.
So, any thoughts on school hours or other changes to help parents with work schedules? Reason I put this down is I heard that the district's actually looking at this, possibly changing starting or ending hours. Uh, and I don't know how serious or how much they're thinking of changing it, but it just made me think of it as far as a question goes.
Well,
Well, we do know that different ages turn, they awaken and become more fully functional at different hours of the morning. And so if we do this, then again, the first thing I would say is we need to investigate. We need to ask questions. We need to get metrics. Hey, how many students of this demographic, of this age, what what time blocks do we need to adjust for them? Then the next subset of demographics and those students, how do we need to adjust them? So I can't I can't give you, John, or the audience an answer to that because I don't even know what questions to ask yet about, hey, look, well, first, why are we doing it? Okay, it's probably to improve it for the parents.
I
If
heard the
it,
reason why they're looking at it was actually for convenience of parents. Was
okay,
the
well,
if
I
we're
Ed wanted to jump in
also
on?
okay,
yeah. So I have a kid in school. I get the emails and I read them. So I know one of the issues right now that is the school buses. They don't have enough drivers, and so in order to fix that, they're thinking about having a school bus run two routes, and so that would stagger the starting times. Um, Regarding what you were just talking about, kids needing sleep, I know that I've been a huge advocate of following the science with teenagers needing sleep. And a lot of people say, well, they should just need to go to bed earlier. That doesn't work. Their clocks, their body rhythms, it does not, they can't go to sleep early. And I'm not sure if it's because of sports or because of the school buses or because parents just want to drop their kids off before they go to work. But and this is just me talking, I think that the high school starts way too early. I think that my kid getting up at like 6:30 or 6:15 in the morning, that's ridiculous. He's just not getting enough sleep. But school buses, I think, is the number one reason right now they're talking about changing the school hours.
So, okay.
so I'll try to be try to be concise. It's almost impossible for me. So long-winded. So if they're doing it just for the parents' convenience to allow the parents to go to work and get okay, well
And
then
again, that's what I heard. Ed may
okay.
have some better info.
So if that's true, then the students don't get a say, and we don't need to ask these questions, and we don't need to do the research. We just do what's best for the parents. Done. Now, if we're going to do the other way, then we got to incorporate what Ed was talking about. And yeah, those circadian rhythms, they're real. I don't know. I have not verified this. So fact checkers out there, yeah, you can fact check me. But I do remember when I was in school, somebody saying that a certain percentage of circadian rhythm, that day night cycle, is set in the womb based on mom's circadian rhythm or what she's doing with her life. And so I was like, if that's true, if fact checkers out there going to verify, well then yeah, once that circadian rhythm gets set and if it's influenced by mom, well, you can't just say, hey, we'll just go to bed earlier because their circadian rhythm's already set.
So, well, we're getting close to the end of our hour, so we're coming up to closing statements. So why don't you tell folks out there why they should vote for Tom Drummond for USD 383 school board?
So I have said this before. I am not a politician, but I'm becoming a politician and I'm glad I'm doing it. So part of the reason you should vote for me is because I'm coming in with a fresh perspective and I'm not completely colored by the political environment because I'm not a politician. I'm a veteran, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and so I'm looking at it with fresh eyes. I also care very, very deeply about performance and metrics. And I have already had some negative feedback. People said to me, "Hey, look, well, you're too harsh. You're too hard. You seem angry." No, I'm not angry. And yes, I absolutely care about the emotional and psychological well-being of the kids. You have got to. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They got to feel safe. They have to have emotional stability and support. But what makes me different and why you should consider voting for me is because there's plenty of that. why you should consider voting for me is I'm going to bring, hey, look, what's the statistical analysis? What are the metrics? What are the quantitative values? What's demonstrable? What is observable? What's repeatable? That's why you should consider. Plus, I bring 29 years of military experience, 16 years enlisted as an infantry guy and medic and corpsman and blah, 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 and having to do the doing. You're turning the wrenches, in literally in the trenches, not figuratively. So I was a doer, a worker, a grunt. Then the Army sent me to medical school to become not medical school, but physician assistant school to practice medicine. So then I was a field grade officer. And I did nuclear physics. I always say this, I was not the lead researcher. I was put on the paper because I was part of the team. But I also had to get familiar with quantum mechanics and statistical analysis and all these mathematical tools. So I'm bringing military doing at the grunt level, military field grade medical officer, practicing medicine, the research aspect of digging through things meticulously as a scientist and a physicist. I'm not a physicist. I was a physicist in training. Plus, I was an educator. Now, granted, that wasn't a huge part of my career, but I actually got my teaching license. I passed the praxis. I was an integrated science teacher. I taught in an inner city school. So I'm bringing all these different perspectives, but I'm not colored by the political realm, and I'm going to bring fresh quantitative assessment to whatever we're doing. So that's why you should consider voting for me. And I could say the standard things. Yes, I'm a father and I love my children and I want them to, yes, I want all of those things. But I think every parent wants that. And I think those things go without saying. And I feel like a canned scripted advertisement if I say stuff that most people already know. I love my baby girl. I love my daughter. I love my wife. And I bring morals and values and ethics. Okay, yes. But I bring all those other things: military, medicine, physics, analysis. Yeah. So that's why you should consider voting for me.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Ed, for producing our show tonight.
Yeah.
Unless something really comes up, and there isn't many days left before the election, so I'm pretty sure this is going to be it as far as our interview series goes. We hope after the election to start doing stuff on different topical items as we go through the year. And of course, we'll have those state elections that'll be coming up as well to talk about. So thank you for joining us.
Hey, John,
And
do,
yes,
do we have a hard out? Because there are a couple more questions that if Tom wanted to
no,
answer
not
them.
really. But
I mean,
again, we can go ahead and go do those, and
well, yeah, because
Sure.
there's
we
comments
still
in
we
here
still
that
we still got our closing statement done, so we won't have to back that up.
yeah.
So
Well, no, there's just some that I thought, and this would kind of differentiate us from the
no,
Mercury
no,
with their
no, that's
softball
fine.
questions. These are
Yeah, sure.
so there's just two that they're straight questions. Let's see. So there was one about bullying that I thought was a pretty good question. Scroll down here. Okay.
I see. It's Melody.
Yeah,
Pooler.
Melody says, and I hate to even bring this up because I think just even invoking this whole concept puts ideas in people's minds, but I don't think there's a lot of kids watching this stream. But anyway, suicide is a serious issue among our young people, with bullying being to blame for some cases. We've had several cases in our high school. Give me your insights on how public schools can address the issue effectively, I guess, of suicide and of bullying.
It starts in the home. Melody starts in the home with the parents. And I mean both the bullier and the bullied. So the parents should be involved enough that they can teach those children, those students getting bullied, resiliency. Hey, how do you psychologically evade this stuff? How do you emotionally defend yourself from bullying statements that could otherwise be harmful? I once heard one of my mentors years and years ago. He basically said this, and I think he was telling a story about his daughter. He says his daughter was crying because she was getting bullied by a whole bunch of other girls, and he had her come to the garage and he had her take like a can of oil and then the oil funnel, and he said, "You're a Volkswagen. You're a Volkswagen. Now drink the oil." And he goes through that thing, but it's such a ridiculous metaphor, right? That the daughter looks at him and says, "But Dad, I'm not a car." And then he basically tried to use that moment and that example to say, then why, when these other people, these other girls say, I don't remember but that you're ugly or fat or whatever the pejorative was, why do you believe them? Because you're none of those things. So that's where it starts. It starts in the home with the parents assisting their children with techniques in emotional and psychological resiliency to navigate those nasty words. So now on the other side, the bullied, an involved, sensitive, intuitive parent should be able to, with very little input from like principals and teachers and the surrounding community, hey, do they have a child that's actually a bully? And then take appropriate disciplinary steps to have that child realize that bullying is not appropriate. It's never appropriate. So you got to have both. So that, and to the suicide piece, yeah, it's really, really sad, Melody. Especially with the social media thing, and you probably know about the congressional oversight with Instagram and Zuckerberg and all that, and then the AI thing. I mean, it's terrible that the influence comes in, the child listens, translates that into personal reality, and then acts on it by unaliving themselves. But again, I would bring you back, even with that tragic situation of suicide, it's most preventable in the home with the parents.
Okay, do you know, are you familiar with SEL? There was a question earlier.
I keep seeing it pop up.
Yeah, I guess it's, and I had to Google
I
it.
know what
Social
ESL is.
emotional learning.
Well, yeah, social and emotional learning involves teaching students skills like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills to help them succeed. So I guess it's just probably, well, what do you think of that?
Are we talking about Catherine's? Isn't the oppressor a reason for including social emotional learning, teaching children?
Well, it came up earlier just as a question in of itself. Would you support SEL in the schools?
Yes, absolutely. You I don't know if you want to make it a part of the curricula and say, hey, look, we're going to talk to the state and the federal government and have new standards that here's the SEL standards. But any decent and genuine human being understands that I have to be able to create a space where my children and students feel safe, that they don't feel attacked. That doesn't mean that you have a right to never be offended, but there you can create a space that, well, if we use my worldview, you have excellent parents in the home of the bullies and the bullied, so that starts there, and then those people come to the classroom, and you have a educator, a teacher, and a principal that is also emotionally aware, so that they create the best possible environment where, if oppressor oppressed stuff, if there's bullying, that solutions, communication, understanding, setting up, demonstrating examples and templates of behavior that's healthy and supportive and opposite of bullying for the students. So, because when you ask about SEL, should we be teaching social emotional learning? Well, again, that starts in the home. A teacher in high school or grade school, whatever it is, K through 12, well, you can't ignore it. That is mostly a parental thing and a community thing and a family thing. And then it is addressed in the classroom, but it shouldn't be a focus. That's family and parents. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the issue people run into with SEL is there's different types of SEL,
And it's all
to what
subjective.
degree.
And who's
Yeah,
measuring it?
different degrees and different types of ways of doing it. And some people are very frustrated with it and don't want to do it at all because they think it's been so skewed. But uh, that's why it's hard to answer a generic question like, "Do you support SEL?" It
Well,
kind of
and it probably comes down to, one of my heroes, Thomas Sowell. There are no solutions. There are almost never any solutions to any actual complex problems. There are trade-offs. And so what you do is you look for the best trade-offs for the most people. But to think that it's a yes or a no, or there's a solution to bullying or a solution to SEL or a solution to being offended, there are no solutions. You look for the best trade-off to keep the most people safe and happy and productive.
I have a question. So the SROs they've been around for decades, but they really started to utilize them more after some school shootings. And so one of the reasons for having an officer in the school was just to be there in case of a tragedy, that they could react quickly. But then sometimes it turns into this whole like classrooms to jails pipeline where you end up criminalizing a lot of behavior that would normally have just been handled through the school discipline system, where, there's a fight and, somebody's suspended, or there's smoking and, the parents are called, but now everything is a criminal charge. What is your views on that?
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Prevention of those behaviors starts in the home, starts with the parents, starts with the immediate family. So, and if I'm understanding your question correctly, let me try and paraphrase it or repeat it back to you. Basically, I think what you're asking is things in generations past that used to be handled by parents or in school by detention or extra homework or whatever it was, they're now in the litigious system. Now they're legal consequences. Am I understanding that correct?
Yeah, well, litigious almost invokes civil issues.
Yep.
We're talking criminal charges for
criminal charges.
Yes, that's what's happening now.
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I have two minds of this, because if there are laws and you break the law, then there's a consequence for breaking that law. And that's kind of the hard-nosed, I guess, military, like in practicing medicine. Hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, or don't do X, Y, and Z, this is a likely outcome for your medical condition or the military operation. But we're talking about kids. We're talking about kiddos, children who are still forming, even because I have told this to many, many of my commanders, because they can come down on soldiers and Marines really, really hard. I'm like, oh, before you crush these people, most young male brains, it's a little bit different for female brains. The prefrontal cortex, the thinky part of our brain that thinks about the big advanced things and time and space, that doesn't even fully myelinate. Myelin is like the insulation on an electrical wire. It doesn't even fully form until like after age 25. So now we're talking about kiddos, way younger than that. Even an 18-year-old senior that's getting ready to graduate isn't fully developed with the prefrontal cortex, so they're likely to make really bad decisions, a lot more than we would as adults. And to criminalize that, and to put criminal charges and convict them of criminal charges when they're not even fully formed, man, my heart goes out, because morally and ethically, I don't think we should be doing that. But then there's the other half of me that's like, well, you broke the law. There's rules and laws and regulations for a purpose, and there's consequences for violating that. So okay, I know that doesn't answer the question, because I'm not giving you, hey, it's this or that.
Yeah, well, no, if it makes you the reality of it is that it's not as if some kid gets caught vaping in the bathroom and he's going to jail. I mean, the system takes everything that you just said about the male brain, the juveniles that are there, the melanin and everything into account, and there's a gray area there where the police get involved, but it doesn't go straight to the prosecutor. I mean, there's things where like they end up having to do, maybe if in the worst situation, communities after multiple offenses, there might be community service or something where they have to clean up cigarette butts or something.
Well, I will tell you this. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but while you were talking, something else popped in my brain. It's like, wait a minute, this is obvious to me now. The police department and the legal system are becoming surrogate parental influences for whatever reason, because the parental influences weren't involved enough in the formative years. So now they're making these bad decisions and bad mistakes, and maybe they wouldn't if the parents were more involved. So now the police department steps in and says, well, since you made these bad decisions, I'm going to have to punish you. So that's the metaphor that popped in my head.
Okay, and I just don't want to leave anybody out here. So T.S. Jones has come in at the very end of the live stream here, and she's got a few comments, but I'll just kind of, her first one was that she just said that students can't be or feel safe when school officials lie and don't hold bullies and staff accountable. That's kind of a general statement. I'm not sure who
Okay,
she's
I agree with
referring to
that.
specifically, but I will just use that as a launching pad to say that John and I are going to be having future live streams that aren't candidate interviews, and we're going to be talking about all of these issues. I would encourage anyone who has a webcam or a phone and they want to come join us to discuss these things. These are the topics we're going to be talking about.
So
Yeah. Okay. And even if not elected, because I know some of my views are pretty controversial and they can be very abrasive, sometimes even inflammatory. But I believe what I believe, unless, like I said earlier, I get more information and like. Because I'm just gonna talk to Courtney if she's still here, because Courtney could provide me. I'm like, oh gosh, I never thought about it that way, and then I can change my view. So even if I'm not elected, I'm happy to come back on and we can go through some of these more inflammatory, controversial views that I have, because I still want to be involved and I want to learn. I want to see what's the best way to get the students prepared for adult life.
Cool.
we think
Wrap
think
it
we got to
up.
wrap it up, Ed.
Yep. Thanks,
Okay,
Tom.
well, again, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see how the election goes. Probably won't have any more live streams, but we'll probably have a few posts here and there as we go into election day. Again, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Ed. And thanks for those who joined us.